Hello, Cleveland. This is Alex Hoffman from the Too Much Effing Perspective podcast, and welcome to Quick Taps. Short episodes with short stories for short attention spans. Our theme today, Jagging Off. Spinal Tap moments that involved a guy who would be on anyone's rock and roll Mount Rushmore, Mick Jagger. Our first story is told by Ken Stringfellow from the Posies. Ken talks about the time he was working on his band's groundbreaking album, Frosting on the Beater, while Mick was in the same studio working on his relationship.
We were working at the Ocean Way Annex when we were doing these mixing sessions for John Hanlon, and we were there for like 2 weeks. But it's one of those classic 60s Bill Putnam old rooms, but there's a bunch of them. In the back studio, Mick Jagger was working with Rick Rubin on an album. Because we had no receptionist, things were kind of loose out there. So I would just wander around at times, and I wouldn't walk into the studio where other people were working, but there's a common area, and off that common area, there's the door to a lounge, and it was covered in Post-it notes with Mick, call Carla, Carla called, Mick, Carla called again, Carla wants you to call, Carla. And it seems that Mick at least had a budding friendship with the future First Lady of France, Carla Bruni, who, at that time was a model. And evidently this budding friendship, which I'm sure was completely innocent, was causing some problems at home. There were no cell phones that I know of at this time. There was, however, a payphone at the front of the studio, and that payphone was right next to the door to our lounge. And this is where Mick would end up spending his days trying to save his relationship. Very uncomfortable. There was no way we could enter or leave our lounge. The phone was literally 8 inches from the door. It was just there. And so Mick would be on the phone for hours and saying, baby, I love you. I love you. Doesn't mean anything, baby. We've got a beautiful life. We got to think of the big picture here, At one point, Mick was spending so much time away from his record that Rick Rubin, who's famously a fairly hands-off producer, had to intervene. Like everything he does is kind of zen, so he just wrote a little note, and he came by and he placed it on the payphone, and it said, Mick, help, Rick.
Hey, I know it's only rock and roll, but that doesn't mean she had to like it, right? Our next story comes from Jordan Summers and Morty Coyle from the band All Day Sucker. Back when they were playing the Viper Room with their group at the time, the Imposters, they shared the mic with Jumpin' Jack Flash himself.
You never knew who was going to show up. Besides the people in the audience, you never knew who would. Chrissy Hind is here. Can she just jump up and play a song on your guitar? Hey, Primal Scream's here. Can they jump? Urge Overkill. Okay. So one night, Jimmy Ripp, who's a blues guitar player, is playing at the Mint. He's got a residency. We find out he's working on the Mick Jagger record because they're friends. And they say, all right, listen, Jimmy Ripp's going to go on first. I don't know, maybe Mick Jagger will show up. Then you guys will go on. You'll do your normal show. So starts off, Jimmy Ripp comes up. He's playing blues stuff. We're like, okay, here we go. And then we're all waiting. Everyone's looking around like they hear Adam Yauch there from the Beastie Boys and Rick Rubin. And we look over, and then they're playing Little Red Rooster. Mick Jagger comes out with a harmonica, and he plays it. Oh, my God, Mick Jagger plays.
So we play Monkey Man. We used to improvise, and we start going to Monkey Man.
From Let It Bleed.
And I'm a monkey. And then towards the end of it, I guess they were cajoling Mick to get up there. So he kind of makes his way through the crowded Viper Room. And I hold up the boom stand over to the crowd, and he leans up and goes into the mic stand. He goes, I'm a monkey. And then turns around and then goes and sits back down. And we're like, oh, we play with Mick Jagger. Ah.
And our last story comes from guitarist Jesse Dayton, who went out looking for a lost puppy and found wild horses instead.
I call this friend of mine named John Jorgensen. He's a huge session guitar player in LA, but his main gig is he plays with Elton John. So he wants to come over and comes by the studio, and he brings this tiny little dog. And it's like a little baby toy English terrier. It looks like Paris Hilton's dog, right? And John's like this big, tough looking guy, long hair, older. And I go, hey, man, did you think you could have got a dog that looks like it fits you? He goes, oh, this is a gift from Elton. He goes, he gave the whole band these pedigree toy English terriers. And so anyway, he puts him down for 1 second. This dog just fucking hauls ass out the studio door, down the hall, and takes off. So we go running after this dog. And I look in there, and Don is at the board. And Don goes, hey, the dog went that way. And I go in there, and Keith Richards is feeding this dog filet mignon. And I walk in to get the dog, and I go, oh, he found his people. And he goes, is he an English terrier? And I go, yeah, he is. He goes, why do you have such a dainty little, like, same shit I asked John Jorgensen. And I said, well, it's John Jorgensen's dog, and Elton gave him. They all started laughing. So I met everyone in the band except Bill Wyman, because he had already left. And everyone was so cool. And Charlie goes, what are you doing here? And I go, I'm recording with Waylon Jennings. He goes, I'm a big fan. Can I come by? And then Mick goes, Waylon Jennings? Is Waylon Jennings here right now? And I go, no, he's not. He's back in Nashville. We're just here doing some overdubs. He goes, oh, okay. And he goes back on the phone. And then Rick Keefe says to Mick, he goes, hey, Nancy, get off the phone. We're going to go down the hall and check out this Waylon Jennings shit. So the Stones come down, and they all come in, and they fucking sit there and listen to these songs. And when they get to this song, and it's The Boxer by Paul Simon, they go, hey, is this a Paul Simon song? And I said, yeah. Well, we get into the studio, and Waylon goes, we're going to cut a song by my friend Paul. And just to come on from the whores on 7th Avenue. That's the way he sang it, you know. It was crazy.
I don't know about you, but I got satisfaction from those stories. And it would start me up if you would follow, rate, and review Too Much Effing Perspective on Apple Podcasts. We'd sure appreciate it. Tune in next week when my co-host Alan Keller and I return for more Spinal Tap moments on Too Much Effing Perspective.
Although it would be as great as having armadillos in our trousers, this podcast is not affiliated with This Is Spinal Tap, and no person or entity connected with the film has sponsored or endorsed its content. This podcast is not affiliated, sponsored, or licensed by Authorized Spinal Tap LLC or Century of Progress Productions.
Too Much Effing Perspective is a Milwaukee Talkies original. Evergreen Podcast Network.